And now it's Deborah Cobelt Live and the Little Italy podcast.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today on Deborah Cobelt Live and our Little Italy podcast. I've got a great treat for you today. Joining me is Gary Hoffman, award-winning executive producer of 30 movies and television miniseries. And also joining me is award-winning producer Valentina Castellani Quinn. Both of them are in development for an upcoming theatrical Broadway play called Fallaci, a one-woman show about the life and loves of the world-renowned Italian journalist Oriana Fallaci, who's done so many award-winning interviews throughout her career. One in particular sticks to mind that she did with Henry Kissinger. And after that interview, he called it the most disastrous conversation I ever had with the press. I found that really incredible. She's also an author, written many books. Two in particular come to mind for me: Letter to a Child Never Born, and also A Man. She's quite an inspirational character, important in terms of the field of women in journalism and women's rights. And there's just so much to talk about this upcoming production, which I am just thrilled to hear about, which I believe is going to be premiering in London and also New York, upcoming. And I welcome you both for joining me to talk about this terrific play.
Thanks for having us.
So much. Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to pick eeny, meeny, miny, mo of who's going to go first here. Gary, let's start with you. Okay. You've had quite an incredible career in television, and so many shows that many of us would recognize. Why did you decide to get behind this production?
Good question. I was introduced to Oriana from my wife, Julie, in the 1980s with a book that Oriana wrote called Interviews with History, which was her interviews with political leaders from all over the world. And at that time, I was fascinated by the way that she conducted interviews, because she had done such tremendous research prior to doing these interviews that she was choreographing the entire interview like you would choreograph or plan a play or a movie script. She was leading somewhere, although the interviewee did not know where she was ultimately going. And then there was these revelations that would start to peel away not only the personalities and the flaws of this person, but their kind of true inner lives. It just stuck with me.
And go ahead, please.
Oh, and one day I happened to look up on my bookshelves and there was the book. And I thought, my God, what else about her life? And I started to look into her life, which was extraordinary. And at the age of 11, she was smuggling hand grenades past Nazi checkpoints in Florence, Italy, 1939, at 11 years old. And that event was one of the core forms that molded her personality for her entire life.
Yeah. Valentina, talk to me about how her story inspired you.
Well, first of all, thank you, Deborah, to have us in here for this preview of this beautiful work. Let me tell you what an honor is for me and a treat is to work with Gary Hoffman. I think for a producer, a filmmaker, a director, an actor, the biggest treat, the biggest honor is to work with a fine writer, somebody that really knows how to put together a script, a story, a feeling, and to bring back the life of such a character, such a journalist and author as Oriana Fallaci. Oriana is a symbol for Italian and international communities for her work as an author, her life, her passion, the journalism that she's done all over the world in a time in the 60s, 70s, where no woman was either capable or even daring to go in the places like Iran and interview Khomeini, the Shah of Persia, go to Vietnam, war zone, etc. And this woman with such passion coming to Florence, just like me, I think it's extraordinary. And let me also tell you, the panic I had when I was introduced to this work. It was Julie, actually, Gary Hoffman's wife and a dear friend. She's an Academy member and quite an amazing achieved actress. And she's like, she called me, she's like, Valentina, you should read this work. Is a Broadway play and is about Oriana Fallaci, which I adore. My mother introduced me to her writing and books when I was 12. Actually, I read her first book. And my first reaction was like, oh, no, I've never done a play in my life. I don't know how to start with a Broadway production, which is very different from, producing a documentary, a feature film, a TV series, nothing that was familiar to me. And then Gary invited me to a reading, a professional reading with professional actors. It was an industry reading. And I was right away enamored about the script. It is something sensational, seldom nowadays we encounter fine writing. We forgot what is fine writing in cinema as well as in theater. And when you find such script, you are bound to it right away for life. You feel like, if I have the audacity to call myself a producer, I have to produce this work. So I finished the reading and I went to Gary and I said, look, I'm frightened, but I will take in the job because in my life, I encounter my biggest wins in every field when I was put in a situation of tremendous uncomfortability. And certainly this was because, a Broadway play is a world apart. The script was started, and then I will cut out to Gary's version of the story. And, we didn't acquire yet the rights, and we wanted to involve the Fallaci family. First of all, to review the script, to check out, the credibility, the feeling of the story. Although it's a fictionary, but is also following for real all the steps of Oriana's life and work. And I recall my beautiful trip to Milan to meet Edoardo Perazzi, the nephew of Oriana, and the one that keeps the legacy and inherited her work and body of work. And it was a love at first sight in the sense that we both found so much value in this work. There has been a lot of work done on her life in theater, internationally, in TV series, but never such work with this depth. And, we reviewed the script together on a few details that he had about his aunt, obviously, that we could not know, her language, little nuances that would get the character alive. Sometimes you get a little detail of the personality, a little gesture in a script, and then the character gets fully alive. And that was the work with Edoardo. We are very grateful to him. And then, of course, acquiring the rights with Rizzoli International. And finally, we had a play. We understood this is actually happening. This is, forming, and I feel extremely passionate about this work. I'm in production with a couple of films, and one is going to run for an Academy this year. But this work has my heart. I have to say it.
I will tell you, I think this is going to be attracting some of the top talent, right, who would want to play her. Anything you can tell us
We cannot tell, but I will tell
Ah,
you something. It was funny at that point. Obviously, we had a Broadway manager, guiding us, business plans between London production, Broadway production, which is very different in budget, in structure, So it was a full immersion learning course, which is beautiful as well, And and then, of course, it came to casting, and even before to hire a casting director, we wanted to kind of size up, taste the water. And I wrote personally to a couple of big names, that very recognizable name, and we encountered right away. I had an answer within an hour,
oh,
from their teams. So, it looks good. Let me say that. I think is an amazing piece for an actress, for a high caliber actress to win a Tony Award, in the sense that is a piece that gives tremendous freedom of expression, and is embodying a woman that was bigger than life. So who wouldn't want to play it? And also, Oriana is such a character and such a human being that is so modern for nowadays in many senses, as a woman. Her kind of writing, her ideas, her vision of the world was so extraordinary, contemporary, and modern even nowadays.
actually, Gary, let's talk about that. What attracted you to her? As a journalist myself, and I've gone to some truly dangerous places in my career, overseas and here. And so, as you can imagine, I'm so attracted to her work as a journalist, and then, of course, her work as a writer. But are there any particular stories that really stuck with you as you were doing this research? And also, if you want to mention some of the incredible leaders that she did interview.
First of all, I'm blushing listening to Valentina's talking about my work, which nobody has said anything like that before. So it's thrilling. But the play consists of Oriana, being the only live actress on stage.
Right.
However, she interacts with 13 other people who have been pre-recorded on screen, and that's played back on screens.
Right.
Some of those people include, for instance, the Shah of Iran, which interview took place in 1973. And those are highly edited, but word for word interviews, although Oriana's in the play commentary on what she's actually doing is not written in the published interviews. But
Right.
that interview with the Shah is intercut with the interview that she did with Khomeini, who overthrew that Shah in 1979. And we find out that their attitudes towards women, autocracy, and religion are exactly the same. So
Wow.
we have these kind of revelations throughout, and because of the interviews being on screens, and those screens will have large images of those people. So you will have the impact on the stage of that political life, but you will also have on those screens the interviews with three of her failed lovers. Well, I shouldn't say failed lovers, with her lovers in failed love affairs. So
That's Go ahead.
the play is interweaving between the political and the personal. And
In fact, look, go ahead. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
You finish.
Well,
Well, you
the people, strangely enough, that link her through her entire life and run through her entire life is her mother and father. So it's a very deeply personal exploration, not only of her roots, but what she experienced with them that allowed her to be so forward-thinking and rebellious and sure of herself in the professional world, and so vulnerable in the personal world.
Well, that's what I found so fascinating about her, and I've been a fan of hers for decades. How she was so fierce in her professional work. Nothing scared her or stopped her, or certainly she didn't let on. But her personal life was just complicated, right? That's a good way to put it. It was so complicated. So she, was flawed like the rest of us, but that's something many of us didn't see. Can you, talk to me a little bit about her personal life and how it's just so different from the professional?
Well, at the age of 30, she had her really first love affair, which,
Right.
not that she didn't have lovers before. Matter of fact, in the play, she talks about her losing of a virginity, which is an interesting story in and of itself. She kind of picked a local boy in her town. She was around 15 years old and said, all right, this is the guy. And her fantasy was that after making love, she was going to get up naked and walk to the bathroom and stand in front of a mirror and go, I did it. But what happened was when she revealed to the boy that he just deflowered her, he was so upset that he started to cry. And she
Oh.
wound up having to soothe him. And he wouldn't stop. She finally had to yell at him, stop crying, for God's sake. And what she said to that is, I don't remember really the sex as much as I remember the feeling of having to soothe him. And that made me feel more like a woman than actually losing my virginity. So there was these
Wow.
moments in her life that the play explores as it basically goes back and forth in a very choreographed way, leading to where we go towards the end of this play.
Wow. Let's talk also a little bit about some of the luminaries that she interviewed throughout her life. Kissinger stood out to me because I thought what he said after that interview was actually terrific. And I just said to myself, you go, because, to be so tough in a field of men who were controlling the world at that time was pretty remarkable, right?
Well, what happened was that Kissinger really didn't want to be interviewed by anybody.
Right.
But Oriana was interviewing the leaders, the heads of state from all over the world, and he kind of didn't want to be left out. So he now then says, okay, I'll be interviewed by her. And it was at the time when they were negotiating the end of the Vietnam War.
Right.
And she's interviewing him and insisting on going back to the Vietnam War. And he keeps saying, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. And finally she says to him, but it was a useless war, wasn't it? He says, I can agree. It was a totally useless war. Well, that headline went all over the world. And then Kissinger denied that he said it. He went to all of the networks. He went to the New York Times. He went to the Washington Post. He went to every major newspaper and said, she's a liar. She's a fake. Don't believe her. And Oriana then held up her tape recorder, which she had on the desk as she interviewed him and everyone else that she interviewed, by the way, and said, wait a second, here it is. And then Kissinger went silent like a sphinx.
Oh, what a terrific story.
And Nixon was going to fire him if he got reelected.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about some of the others? I mean, let's talk about some of her lovers as well. Would you? Because that's such a huge part of who she is.
Well, at the age of 30, she had really her first love affair. Again, it was not the first affair and not the first relationship with a man. But at that time, he was a journalist. His name was Pieroni. And she was madly in love with him. And at the same time, she became, I don't know how to describe this, totally dependent and obsessed with him. And the more obsessed she became with him, the more he withdrew. And he started to have other lovers. And she said, well, that's okay. I don't mind. I mean, after all, one person can love many people at the same time. She would absolutely become defensive and somehow protect that relationship, giving up everything that was important to her to hold on to this man. And finally, at her 30th birthday, the night before her 30th birthday, she begged him to come to see her at a hotel in England. That's where he was based. And she waited for him. He wouldn't return her phone calls. And she waited and she waited and she waited. And in the morning, she took an entire bottle of sleeping pills and attempted to kill herself. Luckily, she was found on the floor by a maid in the hotel, and then she recovered with her sister. And at that point, she made a decision to give up love in her life, which she says was stupid and unsuccessful. But that's the kind of range of experience this woman had. And it's never before been dealt with, excuse me, in any of the writings really about her in terms of television or film.
Mm. Valentina, can you talk to me a little bit about, because she had few female friendships after that, that stayed with her, I believe, through much of her life, right?
She did, yes. What catches me, as a woman and as a storyteller, because that's what in the end a producer does, is the storytelling, is how her private life is imbued into her work,
Yeah.
And I want to stress this before to get to your point, but what I think it's important, and when we face a biopic, that's always the trouble. Do you follow the storyline and do all the chapters of her story? You hit the points, the war, the interview, this stage of her life, the publication of this article or book, or you follow her private life, her life. And that's the beauty of this writing and this play, that it does remain intimate, which what makes it interesting, what makes you connect. And remember, theater, even more than a play, and I grew up in a theater, because of my family history. I think in theater, the most important and most challenging thing is to remain intimate, to remain connected to yourself, to the character, to the femininity or the sensibility of a character, so that also the audience feel that connection and relate to it. And that is what this play does, Of course, yes, her friendship, her story, the wars, the success, the books, but still what kind of filters and transpire is the essence of this amazing, sensual, passionate woman behind everything, and it's a challenging thing to do, really. And I think is a very important lesson for us contemporary women nowadays, especially the professional ones, that to remain connected with our femininity, our sensibility, our sensuality, that many times in this business world we tend to forget, or we don't think is that important, when Oriana is an amazing example of this braiding between sensuality, passion, and yet insane professionalism and the daring quality of her work. So definitely, I would say this more than anything, if we touch, the feminine quality of her.
She didn't have many female friends, but of those that she had, I believe Ingrid Bergman.
Bergman, yes. Another
right?
woman. Yes.
Maria Callas, Anna Magnini. Right? Am I saying her name properly? I hope.
Yes.
Magnani. I always mispronounce her name. My apologies.
No, and in fact, as you see, those were women of the same kind of caliber and personality.
Exactly.
They were, riots. They were people outside the regular time, the regular ideal of a woman at the time, and yet they were extremely feminine and human and professional and daring, But that is the only kind of woman she could truly feel connected, obviously, because she's outside of the time. I mean, you read a book of Oriana nowadays, or you watch, listen, or read one of her interviews, and you think it's been shot maybe a month ago. Besides obviously the historic context of whoever is interviewed, but it is so strong, so contemporary, and so deep that is these are qualities that just extraordinary women such as Ingrid Bergman, such as Anna Magnani, such as Maria Callas could embody, and yet they weren't always revered at those times as much as later after their death.
Isn't that always the way, right? When we have time to reflect on a person and what they've left us behind, that always seems to be the way. But she did collect an interesting group of people that she chose to trust. Yes. Gary, and how do you even focus on what to portray throughout this film? Because there really, really is so much. There's the personal life. There's the books that she wrote. Letters to a Child Never Born and a Man are just a couple of the incredible writings that she did. And when I posted today about our interview, I had many people writing to me saying, oh my gosh, this was my favorite book. And that was my favorite book. And this was my favorite interview with her. I got a terrific, terrific response. And all the different people she's interviewed from, as you said, the Shaw. I mean, just so many. How do you even collect this through such a big life and put it into one performance?
It's an evolution, as you write. You find out what's speaking to you and what her voice needs, and how do you choose from a life that's so large, and get to the important transitions in her life. She became very wealthy from doing interviews with Hollywood celebrities, movie stars.
That's right.
And these interviews only ran in European publications. It's strange also that she took the money from that she was making from that to buy her parents an estate, basically, in Tuscany. And over the years, as she made more and more money, she kept adding to that estate for her parents. She really wasn't very much about her own possessions. So I felt it was important to see what about those celebrity interviews made her so recognized. So in the play, we do interviews with Sean Connery and Alfred Hitchcock, highly edited. We find out that with Sean Connery, she was really quite attracted to him during the interview. And at the same, but she reveals that, he says, are you trying to seduce me? And her response to the audience is, when she turns to the audience and says, well, to be truthful, I wasn't shaken, but I was a little bit stirred. And so she has a sense of humor about herself. At the same time, has Sean Connery reveal himself in terms of his own feelings about insecurity and money and how he ran after it. And which was kind of a revelatory. With Alfred Hitchcock, she winds up having him, almost weep about his unrequited love with Ingrid Bergman. He did everything he could, to try and become her lover, and it would never happen. So he said, I would admire her from afar, like going to a museum and seeing a Degas that you can't afford. You keep it in your mind, you look at it, you admire it, and you can never have it. So there's these wonderful, wonderful revelations that she gets from people, and you understand why she was so famous for that. But ultimately, she decides, and I think this is important, for ego reasons, to get on a bigger stage. And she says, I needed a bigger stage. I needed a bigger story. I had to do it in English in order to be recognized around the world, because she was only recognized in Europe. And she said, there it was, facing me, the biggest story in the world, like a frying pan in your face, the Vietnam War. And so she becomes a journalist. But instead of her, what I include in the play, is instead of her going and doing interviews with the soldiers and with the blood and the gore, her first interview is with a woman, it's called a mother of superior, strangely enough, in the Buddhist religion. And this woman is in charge of deciding which of the young women will burn themselves in the local squares and immolate themselves. And
Wow.
that's a viewpoint no one got, you know. And she says to the woman, so how many are there? She says, well, there's 150 waiting. And she says, well, how many will you approve? And she says, all of them. She says, all?
Wow.
He said, yes. She says, well, would you immolate yourself? She says, of course. And she says, well, why? She says, because a life that's lived in fear is not a life at all. And the Mother Superior says, you know, these women, they suffer greatly. And it's a shame that this has to happen to them. But this is necessary in war to show the wicked the awfulness of war. And Oriana turns to the audience and says, bullshit. I mean, isn't the thousands of mutilated people enough? And then she says, you know, one of those wicked people told me that all of these girls are drugged, that no one can withstand that pain. Because when the girls ignite themselves, they sit there basically motionless. So it's a very different way that she leads us into the human experience in every single interview that she does. And
Wow.
that are recorded will have, you know, great credibility. They'll be properly made up, they'll be properly costumed, and we will get a sense that this is happening in real time.
Wow. Absolutely incredible. Valentina, would you like to pick up on that?
You know, I want to share a beautiful detail because Edoardo Perazzi was so kind to gift me with the original letter between a couple of letters between Anthony Quinn and Oriana. And they shared a very beautiful, deep friendship. They never had an affair, you know, strange enough, because Anthony Quinn did have love stories with the most beautiful inside and outside and talented women of his own time. But with Oriana, he was sharing a very private and very deep friendship. And when I read this letter, I had tears in my eyes, because it felt so real. It felt so intimate. The way these two artists, you know, in different parts of the planet, they were writing each other about their work life, their vulnerability, their fragility, sensibility of sometimes, and understanding the depth and difficulties of doing what they were doing, because they were, you know, they were cutting through what was the mentality of that time to transpire and bring something way more real, way more, you know, more happening of what, whether books, narrative, script writing, screenwriting, acting was at the time. You know, it's a beautiful parallel if you see Anthony Quinn's career and the body of work, the roles he embodied at the time, where there was no ethnical actors, you know, in Hollywood, and let alone also everywhere in the world. And the same with this woman. There was no other woman that was doing what she was capable and daring to do. And this bringing not just their success, their strength, but their fragility, because yet you can see the fear, the fragility, the pain, because it's not easy to create and bring in such stories. There is a lot of pain, and they weren't afraid to bring that pain to what they were doing it, and to show it, to communicate it to the people. You know, often, you know, we are all hiding when we are in pain, And they had the courage, the passion, the great love for life and humanity, to wanting to share their pain, to wanting to share their most difficult time, because overcoming and describing those pain was making them the finest artists and the finest communicators of their times. So this is something that really transpired from her work.
You know, and this is all at a time before social media. And frankly, I think some of the best stories told out there, whether it's her story or somebody's story from 500 or 1,000 years ago, is because there's no social media adding to it. It's real life as it comes to form, right? As stories that are passed down. Clearly, she was born in a time with media, but not social media. There's a big difference, don't you think?
Very much so. You know, I mean, social media and journalism, unfortunately, kind of braided together nowadays. So with the title, we cut the throat of a person, of a story, of whatever, for the punching line that will make more likes, more people to, you know, interact and give a message, when she was way more interested into telling a story from the top to the unfolding, you know, where we get the arch of the character, the arch of an era, the arch of a moment in time and what was happening, you know. So it is a great lesson even nowadays to reread her interviews, you know.
Yes.
The journalists nowadays, you know, you read the title and they are so poor, except the fine journalism. But journalism nowadays is not about the story; is about the punching line. And I think you know, when you forget the story, you forget everything. You lose the people. Just like in script writing, you know, there is a storytelling that has to come through. You know, the punching line is just an accent on a beautiful story. You know, so. I think there is a lot to learn for all of us through the story of Oriana, privately and as an author, especially for journalists, but also for young people, to not forget their story, just to give it away for a pretty picture, a pretty punchline, something flashy of a moment, rather than going within and bringing the real good that is about us, our depth, our pain, our sorrow, as much as our feelings and happiness and great moments, you know. So it's a great fine lesson for our youth.
With social media and all the sources of information now, there's less of a homogeneous audience to experience the same stories. So even though there may be a story that's out there that's important, it's really among thousands of stories that we have the possibility of reading. But at that time, journalists like her had much more impact than today. I'll give you an example. In 1968, she was covering a demonstration in Mexico City. And it was a demonstration about the budget of the Mexican government, but there were hundreds of people in the square. And she was in an apartment house across the street watching it. And she started to hear a familiar sound. And that sound was helicopters. And she knew something was going to happen, but she didn't know what it was, but she was fearful, knowing something terrible was happening. And finally, the helicopters are over the square, and everybody, the hundreds of people, including children, are looking up and seeing the helicopters. And then the helicopters fire flares. I forgot what color it was. I think they were red. And that turned out to be a signal for the Mexican government troops to slaughter hundreds of people in that square at that moment in time. A sniper across the street also shot the two people next to Oriana and killed them instantly. She was also hit by a number of bullets. when she was taken off of that balcony, she was thought to be dead. And she was put into a van, thrown into a van with dozens of other bodies and taken to a facility. I don't remember what it was, or people don't remember what it was, like a gym filled with all of these bodies. And she was thrown on top of a bunch of others. And a soldier, a Mexican soldier, said to a priest, "Okay, can we do a one last rites for everybody and just do one and let's get these people out of here?" And the priest refused. He said, "I'm going to do one at a time." And when he came to Oriana, he realized she was still alive. And she was taken to the hospital, and they saved her life. While in the hospital bed, she got a tape recorder and recorded the story, and it was smuggled out of Mexico City. When it was published all over the world, the Mexican government did. The Mexican government came and took her and threw her out of the country. So I think what's important to remember was that journalism then had bite.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have the same bite now because we're not all focused on the same stories.
Yeah.
And we're all separated into silos. And so there's no communal experience. And I think that's one of the things that the play will remind us of what the impact was that this woman had at her time.
Beautifully put. I so appreciate you joining us today, Gary Hoffman and Valentina Castellani Quinn, to talk about this magnificent play that you're developing for Broadway, also in London. It's going to be quite a story. I really look forward to hearing more about it. Any final words before we let you go?
Well, we're going to be in Matera at Matera International Film Festival, presenting this work with Gary, talking about it, and with Edoardo Perazzi, the Fallaci nephew. And we will present it for the first time as a body of work, and then follow us in the next 6 months through the casting, the rehearsal. You will hear from us. And I know, Deborah, you're joining us in Matera, so what a treat. I look forward, and yeah, you know, this is the work that you dream to have in an entire life, let me tell you. And it is an honor to work on such a character as Oriana, with such a fine writer, and with all the people that I can see already from the moment I started to talk to my financiers, to theater producers, to actors, agents, the enthusiasm for this job, for this work, this play, and for Oriana. So viva Oriana. I would finish the interview saying that.
Thanks so much.
Viva. Absolutely. And I also want to say, Gary, viva Oriana as well, because this is a story many women, whether they are my age or 20 or 15, they need to know, because work really matters and the substance of the work matters. And that's an important lesson for people to understand. And that is everything that she embodied. So thank you both so much for joining us. I interrupted you, Gary. What were you going to say?
Just to thank you. This is the first time I've done an interview like this, my first podcast. And thanks a lot. It was great.
I hope I've made it easy for you. I think so.
You did.
Yeah, you're a natural, Gary. You absolutely are. I'm very much looking forward to this work. Thank you both for joining us, both of you in production for upcoming play, Fallaci, a one-woman show. Valentina Castellani Quinn, Gary Hoffman, both of them will be together in Matera next month in Italy. Very exciting. Absolutely beautiful film festival, might I add. I know you're working very hard on that, Valentina. Yes. So bravo to you as well. Now, everybody.
Director, it's a great challenge, but it's a great pleasure. And I am so, so thrilled to have such amazing artists from all over the world joining us. So I see you there. I thank you, and see us on Broadway.
Absolutely, see you all on Broadway. It's such a story. Everybody, you can find my interview with Gary Hoffman and Valentina Castellani Quinn on YouTube, on Facebook. Then we promote it also on Instagram with little promos, and also as an audio podcast. You can find us Spreaker You can find us on iHeart, on Apple Podcasts, and just about anywhere that you get your podcasts. Deborah Cobalt Live and the Little Italy podcast is where you'll find this interview. I thank you very much for joining us. Please tell your friends. I know there's a lot of fans of Oriana out there, so please let them know about this upcoming production and about our interview. We'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao.